The fear of directly accountable services. If a coffee shop provides lousy service, what is your most likely course of action? Is it to have protests, demand democratic accountability, try to reform the coffee shop? No, that's stupid for many reasons. You go to another coffee shop that will provide decent service. The idea of state provision of coffee is ridiculous. We all know that cafeteria food in state schools is not the best stuff in the world, but the reason is it is not worse than it is because the food production is contracted out, and there is a market of food production which prices can be compared to. Similar to the Soviet Union being able to plan a quasi-functional economy because they could model off of the West. They could figure out the prices of things in various other places and make estimates about how much should be produced given the situation in the USSR. Without other relatively free markets to compare to, the USSR would have been in complete calculational chaos. And so state cafeteria food is functional in the same way the USSR was functional, because it has a free market to compare to. It is the provision of law and police service that has no free market to compare to, and so there is much more calculational chaos in that. Which is why the legal system, a more appropriate name would be the legislation system, as it doesn't enforce the law of the land, but the legislation that pretends to be the law. The legal system in the U.S. is broken. You can't easily purchase the legal or police services from someone else in the same way you can purchase different coffee services. Immigration and emigration restrictions simply allow the state legal systems to cartelize further. Right? They already have geographic monopolies, which is why they're so abusive. There's no competition. There are elections, but of course the problems with elections and voting in general are manifold. Because a person is forced to accept state law, the state legal system is not directly accountable. It doesn't have to satisfy customers. Same with the FDA and various regulation agencies. In democracy, we could say they are indirectly accountable. The indirect accountability of elections is rarely accountability at all. Let's assume direct democracy for simplicity. First, voters disagree. And so if a state program satisfied 51% but royally pissed off the other 49%, that state program would continue and get 100% funding. On a free market, that firm would only get 51% funding, assuming the voters are saying with their votes that they would be willing to pay for their service. Though this is not always true, which brings us to the second problem, voting yourself other people's money. Right? And this is theft. In theory, if 50.0000001% of the population is perfectly coordinated in direct democracy, they can vote themselves the entire incomes of the remaining 49.999999999%. Coordination is never this great, nor is the malice of the majority so savage, but majorities of 60% can realistically coordinate to fleece the other 40%. And third, people in the main are stupid. It took virtually half of the planet to be locked under communism, right? A failure stretching contiguously from Berlin to Shanghai, for people to say, okay, I guess communism doesn't work. And immediately social democracy was leaped on as the next best thing, and virtually everyone today is a social democrat, right? They believe in voting on laws or representatives of laws, and they are for some welfare. Right? People learn generally that communism isn't allowed, and so they went to the nearest best / worst thing, which is social democracy. Thus, people vote for stupid things, and they vote for the enslavement of each other, and then are baffled as to why their lives won't get off the ground. Given that state franchises are involuntary, and that what they force you to do is at the whim of millions of strangers who don't know you and perhaps even harbor malice toward you, what could possibly go right with such a system? And are the unparalleled failures of state programs and state horrors and megadeaths not manifest? But it's really two things. First, corporate rent-seeking is known, and it is known that corporations are made up of people who respond to incentives. Second, people know state law and can get by with state law. They don't know how emergent law would work, right? Ignoring that very few of their interactions with anyone is covered by state law. It's fear of change, right? And this fear of change must simply be overcome because, quite frankly, change is coming, and rather significant change. Right? It can come in the form of a debt-slave nation, hyperinflation, and plummeting standards of living, or it can come in the form of a wrenching transition to freedom. right? You're gonna have to eat a shit sandwich. Any movement that does not oppose the state is not significant, and it's not a movement at all. Changing the heads of state or rearranging the directions the guns point does not overcome the basic, impossible calculation problem, theistic calculation problem that is the state. It's not a movement, it's just the spinning of wheels, right? All statist reforms are mere revolutions that fling crap but remain in the ditch.